My apologies to any attorneys here today. Uh, Kind of hits on a little tongue in cheek, because I know, like right now in our country, there's a lot of different discussions going on. You probably had some this week about, even our city, local communities. There's all kinds of people talking about problems, that need to be fixed, things we need to address, all the things that need to change. Right? Just so many things going on, and I think those conversations are interesting, and we all have an opinion, probably on everything about how things should be done, and I respect that. But rarely, here's the thing: rarely does it ever go beyond talking. Like, man, have you noticed that? We do a lot of talking about the problems. Um, Now, let's just be honest. I know for some of us, we get that, and for a lot of us, like we really do want to make a difference. But the needs, like they start to feel so big, or maybe they're just so out there that I can't do anything about it. Somebody will do something about it. Somebody will do it. But like, what difference could I make, really? Uh, what difference could our church make in this community, in this city? Like, really, there's a lot of other good things going on. A lot of other bigger churches, they'll do it. What could we do? There's just so much that needs attention, so much that needs fixing. And there's a great modern day parable. Maybe you've heard this story before or seen. It's about some starfish. And somebody made this video to kind of make the point. I thought this was interesting. Watch this.
One day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Excuse me, but what are you doing?" The boy replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The sun is rising and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." The man laughed to himself and said, "But there's too many starfish on this beach. You can't possibly make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the ocean. Then turning to the man, he said, "I made a difference to that one."
I thought that's pretty powerful. Because you might not be able to make a huge difference. Even, I mean, I love what we're doing with the giving tree out there. But for a lot of people, I get 50 to 100 bucks for a kid at Christmas could be a stretch for a lot of people. So I hope you caught it. I mean, we have envelopes out there. If you can give $5, we'll put that towards it. But I can't provide for every Christmas kid on the tree that we've adopted this season. But I mean, I grabbed one. This one's mine. Um, and so, it'll be a little bit of a stretch, but this is a blessing, and I encourage you to get involved in whatever ways you can out there as well. And I really want us to become a church that doesn't just talk about the problem. And we talked a little bit about this last week, that we had to kind of come to grips with some comfortable areas that we got into as a church and just kind of stagnated, and just talk about a lot of things and never get around to doing it. But I want to be a church that in whatever ways we can, with whatever resources God has given us at the moment, and that might be adopting a local ministry, and all we can do right now is help publicize. All we can really do is be a voice for that. But if we can do that, we'll do that. We're not going to just suggest solutions, right? I want us to have opportunities together to make an impact, to live a bigger story, to be a part of some of the solutions that we talk about all the time. Because problems need solutions, right? But to have a solution, you first have to be aware of the problems. So if we can build awareness, even, that can be a great thing for our church. But I was thinking, like, okay, here's a problem. I don't know if you run into this, and I'll show this next picture. Okay, here's a really bad problem. Anybody ever have this problem at home? Yummy, right? The problem is, okay, the problem with this is this didn't get eaten quick enough. Right? So it stayed somewhere in somebody's cupboard and just got kind of forgotten. Didn't get eaten fast enough, and now it's gross. Gag, right? Just don't even want to touch it. Now, at one point, though, this would have been great. Would have fit a need, would have filled somebody's belly. But now it's no good to anyone anywhere. And I remember growing up, my grandfather, he was really good at making these kind of points. He was a southern preacher in South Georgia, worked with farmers, and they were pretty good. I mean, they were pretty good at what they did. They had a lot of money, but I remember once I had to be like 8, 9 years old, and I can still remember him preaching this sermon. The outline was, "Don't sit, soak, and sour." I mean, he got on it, man. You're going to sit, soak, and sour, he said, and said you need to live, love, and labor. But I can still remember him talking to him about it and just kind of getting up in their grill a little bit about it. You guys are going sour because you're just sitting on all the blessing God's giving you. And James, the brother of Jesus, he kind of takes us to the woodshed, too. And I want to look at a passage that he talked about. So let's just kind of pull up our girders for a second. This could get a little rough. But I want you to keep in mind, too, this isn't coming from me. James is basically going to tell us, okay, if we don't loosen our hold, then it's going to turn to mold. It's kind of what he says. Nice little Dr. Seuss for you. If you don't loosen your hold, it's going to turn to mold. And then it's not good for anyone, anywhere. Now, James, brother Jesus, he was actually the pastor of the only church in Jerusalem during the first century. And he wrote this letter that was distributed to a lot of the other churches and Jesus followers throughout the Judean and surrounding area there. And providentially, you still have a copy of that letter as a part of your New Testament. And it's cool because in this letter, he actually addresses us. And you'll see yourself in what he says here. All right, and here's what he says. Here's how he actually starts out what he's talking to us about. So hold on to your seat. He says in James 5:1, "Look here, you rich people." But some of you are thinking already, well, I'm glad I'm not rich. This doesn't really even apply to me, right? Most of us read stuff like that, and it's just kind of like, okay, move on because it obviously doesn't apply to me. I'm not rich. I mean, I know some rich folk. You know, I hope they're paying attention because I hope, I know some people that I know are rich, but I'm not rich. I'm just curious, how many of you have ever known someone that was rich or someone that you thought was rich, and you kind of thought to yourself, if I were rich, I could probably do a better job of being rich than they do with being rich. Like if I had their money, I'd do a whole lot better with that kind of money than they just spend their money on stupid stuff, right? And I would never do that. Anybody ever thought that before? If I was really rich like them, I could do a better job. You see what's interesting about being rich? Like when we were kids, we all dreamed of being rich maybe when you grow up. But then some people actually do become rich when they get older. But then it's funny to me because a lot of rich people don't want to admit it, right? They got this great, nice house, nice cars, or whatever. Oh, we got it on sale and got such a great deal or whatnot, and just kind of want to be humble about it, and that's great. But some of you are rich. But when I ask the question, like something like that, you say, like, man, I'm not rich. Someone else might be rich. I'm not rich. But what's equally interesting to me is that we got a lot of people who are rich and just don't realize that they're rich. Just don't know they're rich. They don't feel rich, mainly because they can look at a lot of other people that have more stuff than they have. So they're rich. I'm rich. So James raises a really important question just in the first line here. Is like, who are you talking to, James? Like, what is rich? What is it? And to me, the answer is rich is a moving target. You ever notice this? I mean, it starts in one place and it moves. Like what you thought was rich years ago might not be anywhere close to rich today. For example, I remember the first time I ever got a paycheck that I can recall. I was a stock boy at Steinmart in Nashville, Tennessee, right? I was still riding my little scooter to work. But it started in the summer, worked my first full week, got my big fat paycheck, and it was like 60-something bucks. I'd never seen $60 in my life. I'm like, what am I going to do with all of this money? I have no idea what I can do with $60. But now later on, my first job after college was as a youth pastor over in Arnold, Missouri, and it paid $24,000 a year. First gig. And as a new college graduate who I'd only recently been working at a dry cleaners, made like $5 an hour. Got all my shirts done for free, so that was pretty nice. But for a guy that came from that to make $24,000 a year, I mean, it's like that felt rich. Again, it's like, what am I going to do? But then I found out, it wasn't too long, I found out that the senior pastor of the church, he made like $40,000 a year. And I'm like, man, that dude is rich. Like one of these days, I remember telling Kimberly, can you imagine what it'll be like one of these days if I'm pastor and we made like $40,000 a year? That would be awesome. We'd never have to do anything the rest of our lives, right? As long as we live. But, okay, 2 kids later, what happened? Rich moved quickly, right? Because rich is a moving target. Now, I read recently Gallup, he did one of the surveys he likes to do. It was interesting. They wanted to find out what most Americans thought of when they thought, what is rich? What would you need to make? That was the question. What would you need to make in a year to consider yourself rich? And so they asked the people that were making about $40,000 a year or less, they were asked that, how much you need to make to be rich. And the average answer of people making $40,000, they said, we need to make $75,000 a year. If we could make that, we'd be rich, right? Almost double it. And yet, okay, now some of you make $75,000 a year and you don't feel rich at all. But those who make $40,000 a year, they'll look at you and be like, yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, I'd do anything. I'd love, you're rich. But you don't feel rich. Why? Because rich is a moving target. Then, okay, the same survey, they asked the people that were making around $50,000 a year, okay, what would it take in a year for you to feel rich? And the average answer of those making $50K, they said, we need to make $100,000, 6 figures. If I can make 6 figures, we'd feel rich, right? And I can remember how long 6 figures sounds really, 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 really rich. But some of you are making $100,000 a year or more, and you'd be like, I got news for you. $100,000 doesn't go as far as you think it might, right? With taxes and mortgages and braces and got kids in college and activities and insurance and all this other stuff, $100,000 a year doesn't really go that far anymore. Now, they'd look at you and say, no, you're rich. But you would say you don't really feel rich. Why? Because rich just tends to be a moving target, and you never really get there. Now, here's the challenge, okay? And I'll put this in your notes so you can follow this. But if we don't feel rich, then we will never learn how to act rich, and you will continue to try to get rich, and you won't recognize that you already are rich, so you'll never know how to be rich, which is really what James is encouraging us to realize. It's not about how to get rich. It's about how to be rich, because you are rich. A lot of you don't feel rich, though, no matter how much you have coming in, simply because you don't have any financial margin. That's one reason a lot of people don't feel rich. I don't care if you're making $1 million a year. If you don't have anything at the end of the month, you feel broke. And when there's no margin, there's no peace in your life, no matter how much you have. And a lot of you are making more money than you thought maybe you'd ever make in your life as well. And there's still financial pressure, though, right? A lot of demands on that. Financial pressure that wouldn't make any sense to most people in our world, though. And here's another big reason we don't feel rich is because we know what everybody else has, right? We see it. We see them driving it. We see them living in it. We see them wearing it. We see what everybody else drives, what everybody else wears, where they go on vacation, all this kind of stuff. And then now we got the curse of Instagram. But all of a sudden, not only does everybody else look better than me, but it's like, man, okay, their kids look better than my kids. Their dog looks better than my dog, right? In fact, their whole life looks better than my real life. And then we fall into this comparison trap where we feel even more broke down. But this is a truth I think we all need to reckon with regarding what we have. And this is why James addressed it. It's nothing new. And more importantly, it's not just what we have, but it's what do we do with what we have. Because get this, okay? And I could list a lot of stands, but this one always just jumps out at me. If you earn, as a household, if in your household you earn $33,000 a year or more, you are in the top 1% of all wage earners in the world. Just think about that. $33,000, you are a 1%er. Yeah, see, I knew y'all would be ecstatic about what that was. Woo, we're in the 1% club, right? It's like, now, and I don't mean to be snarky about that, nor should we shouldn't feel guilty because we've been blessed. That's not the point. The goal is to acknowledge, though, okay, there's some level of responsibility with this because there are millions and millions and millions and millions of people all around the world right now that think that you and I are filthy rich. And I don't know if this was true, as true today as it was in the first century when James wrote this, but back then there was an assumption even that, okay, the rich people, they're blessed by God. They're favored by God. God must love rich people more than he loves us. That's why they're rich. God obviously doesn't love poor, sick people as much, or they would assume maybe they did something wrong to make them poor and sick, or maybe their parents a lot of times got blamed for it. The idea, though, is the more that you had, the more you were loved and blessed by God. And it was kind of this Old Testament leftover. Because when you get to the time of Jesus, he taught, no, rich people aren't more loved by God. Rich people are more responsible to God. God blesses. This went all the way back to the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham will bless you beyond anything you can even count and measure, but there's a purpose for it. You are blessed to be a blessing. Jesus came and reminded people of that. You're not loved more by God, but you are more responsible. There's a reason for it. To whom much is given, much is required, right? So James says, look here, you rich people. And now we know he's talking to us, all of us. Then he says this, weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you. To which we would say, that's nuts. If I got margin, if I've got what I need, if I'm rich, what are you talking about? Rich people have the most secure future of anybody. That's what I want, right? Rich people never worry about the future, right? But James is brilliant because James understood a really important truth, okay? So it's true now as it is then. Rich people, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, rich people tend to put their security in their wealth and what they have saved up, right? That's where we put our security instead of in the one who richly provides. And this is where James is saying you're in danger. Poor people don't put security in riches or wealth because they don't have any. But as soon as I begin to accumulate, as soon as I begin to consume and store up, my trust just naturally wants to gravitate from God to me and my stuff. And this is where it actually gets strange for me because many of you probably have more than you've ever thought maybe in your life, and you worry about it more than you've ever worried about it in your life too. Think about that. Stress doesn't go down with more stuff. It's as if no matter how much you have, it's never enough. There's always more to worry about. And with more stuff comes more, okay, what ifs? Because now what if the stock market dips? What if I get sick? What if my husband leaves? What if my wife passes away? Who's going to take care? What if? So without meaning to, our trust tends to migrate away from God, who is the source of all good things, who gives me my next heartbeat. But then we start focusing on our stuff for our security. And consequently, we don't mean to do this, and this isn't even just religious, but there are studies on this, okay? The more we have, the more our hands tend to want to close tightly around it. This is true of everybody. We feel like there's more to lose because there is, but James is brilliant, and he's pretty assertive about this too. He goes on in verse 2, your wealth, he says, is rotting away, and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags. Your gold and silver have corroded. He's like, you're accumulating so much that you don't need, that it's rotting away. The people he's writing to, they had hoarded so much that it was decaying. His point was, you've held on to it so much for yourself that now it's just like that moldy bread. It's not doing anyone anywhere any good, including you. Now, you guys, I was looking for something this last week at home, and we just moved. Seems like it wasn't that long ago. It's longer than it should be for the state our house is in right now, still. But I'm going through one of these drawers. You guys have any of these drawers that just kind of accumulates everything? It's like the wow drawer, because that's what you do when you open it up. You're like, wow, where did all this junk come from? And you can kind of go through all of this stuff. But the reason I have probably more than one of these wow drawers around the house. But all this junk is in there because it's kind of like, okay, I got this and I don't know what I'm really going to do with it, but I might need it someday. So I put it in the wow drawer and then it just kind of accumulates. You know what I did find a couple of weeks ago? It was Kimberly's Motorola Razr phone. You guys remember these things? And it was in pristine condition, beautiful. Sharp, remember that was the day. Hers was blue. I think Mackenzie had a pink one. I found Kimberly's blue Motorola phone. And I was just thinking, okay, back in the day, I don't know why we even still have this thing. Why is this in this drawer, this box, or wherever it was? Because we thought at some point we might use this. At the time, I could have sold it, could have traded it in, could have done something with it, but we held on to it. And now I have this piece of history that is doing nobody any good. Right? But James gets brutal. He gets even worse than this. In verse 3, he says, the very wealth you were counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. Like, whoo. And in this culture, this was some common judgment of God kind of language. Because, when they heard this, though, in ancient times, people were punished very publicly, right? Very violently. And it's easy for religious people to relate the punishment they saw on earth to what God might do to them if they don't do right. So James warns God will eventually judge you by how you use the blessings and riches he provided you. And then leading into this judgment idea, it's almost like James enters into the courtroom, and he says this, verse 3, this corroded treasure you have hoarded will testify against you on the day of judgment. Now, what's he getting here? Okay, he's like, you think you're doing good by storing up all your treasure, but it comes less and less and less and less useful over time if you don't do anything with it. He's not harping against saving and retirement. That's not what he's getting at. But he's like, the day will come when all that stuff, if you're not careful, all that stuff you've hoarded up and haven't done anything with except look to it for your security, is going to talk back to you. It's going to talk back about you, and if you're not careful, it could embarrass you instead of talking about your good character. It could actually speak against you. And it's like, wait, okay, someone could look back at all the stuff I had and not think good things about me. They could think negative things about me. But yeah, James assumes that there's an accountability towards God for anything that's been given to us. You've been blessed to be a blessing. And I know some of you are already thinking, okay, Dennis, I thought all this lead with love stuff you were talking about was difficult. This is really, this judgment of God stuff. I mean, this can sound really medieval even. Like, where are you going? Some of you may even still struggle with the idea of a personal God at all that holds you accountable or and I get it. I get all of that. Maybe you think we've progressed beyond all of that. I understand. But James believed that God was involved in the very minute details of our lives. And James believed that there was more to this life than just this life. Okay? And he believed that we are accountable to God for how we live this life because of one main thing. And it wasn't because he was religious. It wasn't because how he was raised to think or taught to think. It wasn't because of what somebody told him. One thing caused him to believe this thing about this life being more than just this life. And James had watched his own brother, right, be killed, crucified. He'd watched his own brother be put into a tomb. He could take you to where they buried him. But then later, James was having breakfast with his own resurrected brother on the beach and having conversations with him after he was raised from the dead. And when you have breakfast conversations with someone who came back from the dead, you're going to start believing in eternal life. And James's perspective changed. So it's amazing that towards the middle to the end of his life, James embraced his own brother as his Lord and Savior. And history tells us ultimately James was stoned to death because he wouldn't renounce this belief. He held on to it. He believed this. That's pretty telling to me. And because he believed so strongly in a life beyond this life, in a life bigger than just this life, he believed strongly that we would be held accountable to what we did with our stuff, time, treasure, talent in this life. We're blessed to be a blessing. Think about it this way, okay? We will all run out of time before we run out of stuff. For the most part, right? I mean, think about this. Have any of you ever had the responsibility of having to go and like clean out a house or storage after someone passed away? It can be heart-wrenching, it can be hard, it can be difficult. It can be embarrassing sometimes. Like, have you ever had to walk into someone's home full of stuff, just full of stuff in boxes, and you didn't really even have an idea how deep it went, and the person that belonged to, they're not around anymore, and once you got into it, you just kind of wondered, where in the world did they get all this stuff? I had no clue. Like they couldn't even wear these clothes. Why are they still hanging on to all this stuff? Some of these are decades old. They're rooms with furniture. Like, I mean, my grandparents had a room full of furniture that wasn't even meant to be sat on. Like this museum furniture or something. And you take things, you go through stuff like this and things they considered of great value. And you find yourself now, you're having to get rid of it somehow. And suddenly in that moment, that stuff that once was so important becomes a chore. And in some cases, it can speak negatively, not positively. I remember a financial planner back in Atlanta who once gave a talk at a school we were at. He was just talking about how great it would be if you could plan your life so that when you left this life, you left with nothing. Like you planned it just so well that everything you accumulated, everything you consumed got put to use somehow. When you left, it was done. You served your purpose with everything, right? Like you just planned just enough to finish well. Maybe leave a little something for the kids or something like that if you had it, or maybe just say sorry, right? I'm going to spend it all on myself in the last few years and you're on your own or whatever. But like Kimberly and I, we're in the middle of some of that middle of life kind of end of life planning stuff, and it can be really morbid when you're having to think about, okay, when you're going, where does this go? When you're going, I'm still here, but you have to plan for that stuff. and this trust guy we're talking to, he has to go through this long list of like backups for our stuff. Okay, so it goes to this person first. Well, what if they die with you? Okay, well, it's got to go to this person. Okay, well, what if something happens to them? It's like, it's the end of it, I don't know. Like if you're both dead and your kids are dead and the dogs are dead, who gets the stuff? And you can put your wealth into a trust or a ministry or a charity, other cool things like that. But wouldn't it be interesting, this guy was talking about, if you could somehow end this life knowing that all that stuff had been used for good or given away, continuing to be used somewhere, it's all in circulation out there, someone helping other people. And I don't know, I remember thinking, that may be pie in the sky thinking, but that's not even possible for most people. But it's an incredible thought, and much more appealing to me than the thought of leaving this life with a bunch of stuff left over that others have to deal with because I just hung on to it and clung to it so tightly. Now, I also understand that if there is more to this life than just this life, then this is incredibly important. But if you're listening to this morning and you don't believe that, if you just believe all there is to this life is right now, there's nothing going on after this. We're supposed to be good citizens, right? We do what we have with what we can, but then it's over. Then none of this is nearly as important to you. If all there is to this life, and you get to enjoy some nice stuff while you got it, right? You get to go on some nice vacations. That's great. Eat what you want to eat. Have a good life. Then you die and it's over. If this is it, okay, there's no value to anything that I'm saying so far. You're just kind of squirming. You might have made it even this far with me thinking, oh, Dennis, I know where this is going, right? You're a good salesman. You're just like every other preacher. There's going to be this hook coming at the end. It might get all sappy and emotional, right? And then you ask us for money, and I'm way ahead of you, bro. I know where this is going. Listen, okay, but if there's nothing more to this life than this life, I'm surprised you're even still listening. Because if all there is this life, then you are totally justified in saying, right, I have no responsibility to anybody for anything because I earned everything I have. If this is all there is, yeah, I mean, that's pretty wise. I don't know, you, the church, God, anybody, because this is it. I earned it, it's mine. But if there is more to this life than just this life, and James, the brother of Jesus, would say, well, yeah, there's a whole lot more to this life than just this life. I saw my brother killed, buried, and came back again, which means everything he said about how this life is connected to eternity and eternal life is true. Absolutely true. And if he's right, and I definitely believe he is, then there may be more to this life than you assume. Here's what Jesus himself had to say about it, if you're interested. Jesus said it's not really even about your stuff. He tells me, okay, I'm not the owner. I'm a steward. I'm a manager. Because as much as I think I did it all on my own, none of us filled out applications to guide to where and how and who and when we wanted to be born with what and all this other stuff. We're stewards, and stewards are always accountable to the owner, and God owns it all. And it's a radically different perspective. And your Heavenly Father knows that, okay? He knows how it works, and your Heavenly Father commends you for working hard. Saving your money, being responsible. There are all kinds of fulfilling traits that point to your integrity, your character. And I worry a lot myself, I have to confess, even though I have way more than a lot of people. Like, I don't consider myself anywhere close to wealthy, but I have a lot more than I need, if I'm being honest. You know, which maybe that just means I need better goals, or, you know, I don't know. Maybe that's, I don't do more with what I've been given. Maybe I'm afraid of making bad goals and I don't do anything with it. But we've all been blessed with more than we need. But here's the thing. What little I do have didn't just fall from the sky, right? I didn't steal what I have. I didn't manipulate. I didn't trick anybody out of anything to get what I have. I haven't had any rich relatives die on me and leave me an inheritance. I likely never will, anything like that. Okay, I earned every little bit of what I do have. And when I read the New Testament, I'm commended for that. I'm commended for working hard. But I also read that I'm commanded to be generous with whatever little bit I have. And as a Jesus follower, I'm to be above average generous. I'm blessed to be a blessing. Even though I've earned it, I'm to be generous with what I have because my story, my life story, is bigger than just me. And in the end, I owe it all to God. I didn't get to choose the country that I was born in and the family. I didn't get to choose the opportunities afforded to me. And no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I earn, no matter how much comes to me, I will always be indebted and accountable to my Heavenly Father, who reminds me that it's not even really mine. How do I know? Because one day I'm going to leave it all. Like how much of it? All of it. I'm going to have to leave all of it behind when I'm gone. Now, one day, somebody else is going to have to take your stuff, whatever your stuff is. Someday, somebody else will have your stuff. Right? It's an irrefutable truth. Can't take it with you. Somebody else is going to get it, which means it's not really yours. And just because it came to you doesn't mean it's just for you. I think that's what James is kind of getting at with us. Not in God's economy, and I get it. You don't like hearing that. Neither do I. It can start to sound like another guilt trip, but it's really the opposite, okay? And some of you guys get this. Some of you that have learned this principle of generosity understand. It's not about being guilty at all. It's about being free, and James explains why. He says in verse 5, you've lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence, right? It's like you thought you were doing good, feeling responsible, saving, consuming, hoarding, collecting, right? Just in case there's something unseen. You got your bases covered. But James goes on. He says, what you've really done, you have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. To which we're like, wow, James, I mean, dramatic much, man? I mean, whew, fire and slaughter, what does that even mean? But here's what I think he's getting at, okay? You've likely heard of fatted calves in some of the Bible stories, right? From this time and earlier where they would literally have to fatten up a calf, cow, or whatever they were going to use later on for a celebration. But they had to protect it. They had to overfeed it, to guard it, so they could use it later on, celebrate something. Now this week, right, this coming week, most of you celebrate Thanksgiving, and later we're going to celebrate Christmas. And when you're thinking about planning those meals out, what do? Like some of you probably you'll hop online, or go to the store, order yourself up a turkey, order yourself up a ham. And if you don't like that turkey or that ham, you can just order yourself up another turkey or another ham. And if you don't like the turkey or ham, right, you can order up brisket. You can have sausages. You can eat pizza. You got all kinds of options. Whatever makes your meal. Tofu, doesn't matter. And for the most part, most of us, we can be kind of last minute with these celebrations, right, preparing. But back then, the only thing you could keep long was grain and wine. And some of y'all are thinking, well, that sounds like a celebration to me, right? But if you were rich enough, you'd have some cattle for some meat for these celebrations. But you'd have to plan way ahead if you wanted it to be ready. So James is kind of using this metaphor and saying, okay, you rich people, listen, you rich people, that's us. Think you're being smart, planning it way ahead. But here's the catch, okay? You're the calf. You're the calf. You might be planning your own demise. You might be planning your own embarrassment. You're fattening up that stash thinking that you're going to have something to celebrate, but James basically looks at him and says, you have fattened yourselves up for the day of slaughter. You think that all that you've accumulated and hoarded is going to end in a celebration, but it'll soon lead to your own embarrassment if you're not careful. Woo, I mean, that's harsh. And these people reading this were like blown away. We're kind of like, good thing he wasn't writing this to us. Of course, he was in the bigger picture, but just like these rich first century believers he was writing to then, James knew that what would eventually happen to them is going to happen to us too. One day our lives are over. And the bigger story of what we did with our time and our treasure and our talent and our stuff, what we did with that is going to say so much more about us than anything. And James would put it like this, okay? If we don't loosen our hold, it turns to mold. You got to be given while you're living, somebody else said. And what I cling to now may eventually become a source of embarrassment. Now here's the hook, okay? And we're going to be done, so I'm going to let you out of here and you not squirming. Here's the hook, okay? There is no hook. I really just want you to wrestle with this on your own. I want you to work this sort of stuff out for yourself, because many of you are followers of Jesus, have been doing that for a long time. Some of you may not be, though. Some of you may just still be exploring faith. Maybe you've been in church for a while, but you're still just not sure about all of this. Others might be like, okay, good grief, when is he going to shut up about this stuff? I'm aware. Get it. But I'm also aware that each one of us are stewards, which means each one of us will give an account of the story of our life. And so I don't want you to go out of here saying, okay, well, Dennis said saving was bad, so I just need to go up and use it all because I can't take it with me, so like YOLO, right? No, you should be saving, right? You should be investing. You should be planning. You should be doing all of those things. Jesus had a lot to say about that too. But don't become a hoarder. Don't become someone who puts their security in all that stuff. And don't rob yourself of the joy of generosity. I want your life to be a story worth telling, and you want your life story to be a story worth telling. And that's something you got to sort out and continue wrestling with individually. So I want to encourage you to do that. But in the meantime, we as a church, we're going to lean into this corporately, much more strategically, hopefully, than we've ever had before. And as a body, here, show this next slide. Here's some things that I want you to be aware that we're doing. I'm calling these big story initiatives. Really two big things we talked about is leadership, and this is kind of what we're focusing on toward the end of this year and going into next year. We recognize we need a much broader on-ramp, if you want to call it, for serving teams here. A lot of people want to get involved. You come here for a few weeks and like, hey, where can I serve? And we're recognizing, okay, we've become so comfortable in some areas that it's hard for people to step up and get involved in just serving and helping out around here. And so we're going to do an intentionally better job of helping people get involved and find a place where they feel like this is mine. This is my church. These are my people. And even maybe put more of a priority on that than we've ever done before. Because there's joy in that. And we want each one of you to be involved. This is your body. You are an important part of that. And then the second thing we're looking at is what we would call our intersect partners, community intersect partners. Kind of goes along with the whole crossing kind of thing. So instead of like, well, we've learned this the hard way in some ways. Instead of trying to do everything just as a church, we need this ministry, we need that ministry, we need that ministry. Let's look for people, partners in our community, in our city that are doing what we have a heart for doing, and they're doing it well. And let's get behind them. Let's partner with them. Let's do what we can do to help them beyond our own borders do what they do well. And so here's some areas. There's like 5 or 6 of them that we really focused in on going into next year, especially that we feel like, and some of this came from surveys we've done over the last few months and just talking with you and getting feedback from you. Where's your heart? What is it that God is doing within our body? And these were kind of the things, a lot of them that came up. There's more than these, but hunger's a big one. And so we've had relationships with Harvester, Impact Ministries right here in Blue Springs, Missouri that we want to, or Blue Springs, downtown that we want to continue helping with. Foster and adoption. Many of you are involved in that. Some of you have done that. Some of you are doing that. And so that's where the Christmas tree came from this year. From Lafayette, foster and adoption support. We want to be involved in some of that. Human trafficking is a big need that a lot of people have had. Kimberly and I just this last week, we went down and visited Restoration House. And I'm not going to share a lot this morning, but we're blown away. I can't even tell you how much I didn't know that I thought I knew about what goes on and what they're doing. And it's amazing the things that they're doing. And so I definitely, personally, I want to throw some of my involvement and help there. And we're going to do that as a church as well. Hopefully in the beginning of the next year, we're going to invite the president to come up and share. It'll change your life. Homelessness, that's something that's always going to be with us. And so Community Services League, we've been in contact with them about some things we can help with. City Union Mission, I have some contacts down there. Mental health and wellness, you hear about this in the news all the time. I'm growing in my own personal passion for other pastors who struggle in these areas. The tragedies you hear in the news because pastors, ministers, even other high-level leaders sometimes just suffer in silence because I can't admit I got a problem. And so we are leaning into that. And it's the first time I've actually seen it in print on a screen, LifePoint Counseling. But that's a thing that we're leaning into, and we're going to be next year even putting some resources into this little house next door and leaning into that as well. And then there's a lot of other things. Alex's Lemonade Stand, some of you have been volunteering with them for years. They help with childhood cancer. We've been serving with Blue Springs School District. Fill in the blank. There's some other things that I'm excited. And we want to be careful we're not spreading ourselves too thin. Like I said, in some of these, all we can do at this point is help raise awareness. But you know what? That's a starfish we can throw. And if we can do that, we're going to do that. Other ways, we're going to go out and serve. It might be giving. Some of you have been blessed to be able to give resources, money, time, some of your talent even to some of these needs. But show this last one. This is something we're going to be leaning into this coming season as well. Through December, and we're going to do a vision offering. You can give it any time between now and the end of this year. And this is something that, above and beyond what we encourage you to give, this isn't an arm-twisting thing at all. This is something I hope you will feel blessed to be a part of. And we're not putting a number goal on this. The goal is 100% participation. I mean, I want all of you to participate, whether it's $1, $100, $1 million, whatever. It's a blessing to be able to be a part of something bigger than you. And so a couple of things that this offering is going to go to this year. We need a new church. I've been talking about that forever. So that's kind of an us thing, but it does kind of help us in the community here. So there's going to be a small portion of that go to that. The counseling center I just talked about, we want to put some funds into that going into next year and do some wellness things there. And then Restoration House, as we just mentioned, we're going to put some money as well as some time and energy toward that in the coming year, as well as some of these other initiatives that I just talked about in partnerships. But that's where the money is going. And you should know that everything you give to this church, whether it's through an offering, what comes in, it all goes out. Right? Like we have a savings account, but it's all designated. We don't keep any of it. There's no plan for anything like that. You should have a savings account. We don't do that. It's all used to connect people within our circles of influence. So, I mean, serving God is people as God enables us to lead with love, live a bigger story. And it's because, and I want you to understand this too, we believe that every person in our community, every person in our city, every person on this planet matters to God. Whether God matters to them or not, they matter to God. And so we want to be known as a church that is for everybody in our community, for everybody in our city as much as we can. That's what these initiatives, that's what these Intersect Partners are all about. Jesus made it so clear, right, that the best way you demonstrate your love for God is by loving people, the people that he brings into your circles. And I believe this is going to be one of the most exciting, one of the most fun seasons in the history of Life Point Crossing. And I don't want you to just be on the outskirts looking in. I want you to find your starfish. I want you to do your part, whatever it is. You know, let's show our community, show your circle of influence, whatever that might be for you. That for us, okay, this is way more than just religion and songs and way more than just sermons. This is the compassion and the generosity that reflects the heart of our Heavenly Father. So let's live a bigger story, all right, together.